Hello, my name is Alpha, and the year of 2017 is finally nearing its end. For me, the year has been arduous, and I certainly would like to fire off 2018 as soon as possible and put 2017 behind me. Even so, there have been some amazing games this year, and I've had the pleasure of playing some of these games. For me, 2017 has been stacked. And so, I decided to make a top 10 list of the best games I've played this year. In my opinion, of course. Also, I just want to mention that these are just games I've played, so many games might not appear on this list. Without any further ado, let's start with some dishonorable mentions.
We dream of exploring the unknown, discovering what lies beyond.
The entire initiative is at risk. None of the Golden Worlds panned out. They're a bust. We need to find more resources, but that takes people, and we can't wake them up. Now more than ever, we need a Pathfinder.
Mass Effect Andromeda. I mean, there's a very good reason why this game deserves the spot of worst game this year. I know that a lot of people looked forward to this, and what we got was a steaming pile of shit in my opinion. It was obviously released in an unfinished state, as YouTube exploded with videos of bugs, weird animations, game-breaking elements and more. And even though the Mass Effect series are quite famous for having amazing stories, this one just couldn't live up to the same quality as its predecessors. The story is so boring and feels like a pieced together mess, and it doesn't make me interested in the game at all, unfortunately. The uninteresting characters, the emotionless faces, the confusing menus and the lackluster voice acting. There are so many fundamental elements that doesn't feel close to being a AAA game. I love Dragon Age Inquisition, and I can't understand how it's the same developers that made Mass Effect Andromeda. And I think the worst part about the game is that there probably won't be a main Mass Effect game in a while, if at all. I know it's quite controversial of me to put this as the worst game of this year, but I'm tired of seeing franchises being treated like dirt to the fanbase. It seems like everything EA has a finger in results in some form of controversy. I just hope future iterations can make us forget about Mass Effect Andromeda with something deserving of the Mass Effect name.
I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put the blame on me.
Now you are a part of the first wave of arcs arriving in Andromeda, our new home for humanity.
Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. There's a father up above, and he's looking down in love.
Outlast 2. This one hurts, because I adored the first Outlast game. This game was also one of my most anticipated games this year, and that's why it's extra disappointing. The game had a great start, and the first 3 hours is amazing. It feels like a great sequel. The problems start occurring when you get left in these large open areas where you don't know where to go. The game at that point becomes more trial and error than I'd like. What makes these sections worse is the AI itself. Sometimes it feels straight up bullshit when enemies can spot you through walls or see you even though you're hiding out of their sight. Now this could be a simple drawback to an otherwise great game, but unfortunately the flaws run deeper than that. The story is extremely disappointing and it feels too cliché here and there. After a helicopter crash, two separate religious sects struggle for the possession of your wife, Lynn, who one of the sects apparently kidnapped and impregnated with the Antichrist. In just a couple of hours at most, by the way. Now it's your job to rescue her while being haunted by the memories of your childhood friend Jessica Gray, who died when Blake, the main character, was young. It's a great setup, but in the end it seems like Red Barrels just started to debark, and many of the game's explanations feels vague and random, especially towards the end. I don't want to spoil anything, but feel free to discuss with me in the comments if you doubt I understand the story. Where the game shines is whenever you get to the variety of school sections, and that's also when the game is the creepiest, while feeling like a true sequel. But they never really amount to anything greater than some lore and chase sections. The fucking ending is a slap in the face in my opinion, and while Outlast managed to become an instant horror classic, Outlast 2 apparently didn't get the memo on what made the first game great. Number 10. You know, Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy just missed the mark this year, simply because it's a remake, and therefore not a new game per se. I didn't expect much out of this indie game, to be completely honest, but Little Nightmares surprised me. Sure, the visuals looked unique and stylish, but the short burst of gameplay I saw from early trailers and gameplay videos didn't impress me. However, I bought the game during a PSN sale, and now I'm so damn glad I didn't miss out on it. The game's introduction is a little bit weak, since you have no idea what's going on, but this quickly changes to a dark ambient adventure of survival. You're this little yellow dudette named Six, running around in varied surroundings, filled to the brink with great assets, cold metal and scary ass creatures. The gameplay consists mainly of a different set of puzzles and searching for charming little critters known as gnomes. It's clear that the game has been inspired by such things as greed, food and consumption, but the main influence comes from childhood fears, like nightmares, and that's where Tarsier Studios came up with the name for the game. Me and a couple of friends get together 2 times a year to play video games for almost a week. Essentially a huge game party. And during this party, we often play horror games, so we decided to play this during the event. Let me say that the game is best experienced during the night, and it gets even better when you can all discuss about the story and gameplay solutions as a group. The game has many strong points, and one of them is appreciated by a poor student like me, namely the price tag, which currently sits around $20 on Steam. The art style and sound design is also among some of the strong points, and you'll without a doubt notice the genius sound design during especially tense moments. If I needed to bring up something negative about anything in the game, it would be that I feel like it's a bit too much on the short side, and there can be a lot of trial and error sections that removes a bit from the enjoyment. But all in all, this is certainly a great piece of content for its price. Little Nightmares is a haunting and genuinely frightening experience that I hope you will experience too. It's well worth it. Number 9. The end of an era, truly. I didn't buy Tekken 6 or any Tekken related game since Tekken Tag 2, but in some weird way I was drawn to Tekken 7 and spent my savings on getting it. Was it worth it? Well, maybe not, but it's still a great game. I know a great deal of people was very hyped by this iteration, especially after all the trailers. Like many games I play, I try to avoid as many trailers as possible, as to not spoil my later game experience, and it was so worth it this time around. The gameplay is traditional Tekken, mostly. This time the story mode is composed of an absolutely boring narrator, beautiful art and a mediocre storyline. This may not sound so impressive, but I believe Tekken 7 is still worth the buy. The game is riddled with stunning stages and flowing deep combat. Every character have more than 100 moves for you to master, and at a higher level of play, this can become very tricky. The main difference from the earlier games is the introduction of the Rage Art and Rage Drive. These cool moves can be used when you get low on health, but only once, so don't waste the opportunity. There are of course other modes too. In arcade mode you get the standard arcade mode experience. In treasure mode you battle against randomized opponents that gets harder and harder as you progress. And if you win you get fight money that later lets you buy cool customization options that you can edit the characters with. The game has a plethora of great soundtracks, and speaking of which, you can also mix and match different soundtracks from former entries of Tekken to create the ultimate playlist. A few points that retracts from the game is the relatively short story mode, which is 3 to 5 hours long, and the lack of ending cutscenes in the arcade mode. Seeing as these has always been included in Tekken games, it's a real letdown. The current state of the game is unfortunately a bit on the light side, especially for casuals and offline players. Still, the joy I've gotten out of the game so far has been enough to justify the buy, and I hope that the next game in the series improves upon Tekken 7's laid groundwork and becomes even better. Number 8. I've always loved feudal Japan and ninjas. They were and still are super cool. Mix that with Japanese folklore and a fast-paced combat system and you've got yourself a match made in heaven. The premise of the game is based upon real-life events. William Adams was a person that went on to become among the first ever Western samurai, and he's the one the game's protagonist is based on. The game starts in the Tower of London with William imprisoned. You make your escape and begin traveling to Japan by sea. The Japan in the game is plagued with yokai, Japanese folklore monsters basically, and you become a warrior to save Japan from these monsters and reclaim Shirshu, apparently, a spirit that's been with William since childhood, but she's been stolen by Edward Kelly. Along your journey, you'll meet historical figures such as Tachibana Munishige, Ieyasu Tokugawa and Hanzo Hattori, all based on their respective real-life persons, and that just makes the game and lore more interesting. What made this game a success was mainly the popularity of Souls-like games. I really despise comparing all new games to Dark Souls just because they're kinda hard, but in this case it's slightly true. There are many elements in Nioh that was obviously inspired by Dark Souls, but a lot of mechanic was also inspired or taken from Ninja Gaiden, a previous game from Team Ninja, the developers of Nioh. Now that I think about it, the game have been inspired by many games. The style and combat feels like the older Onimusha games. The loot system is based on Diablo's loot system, and the difficulty and level design is partly based on Dark Souls and partly based on Ninja Gaiden. I think that the value is great, as it'll take you many hours to complete the whole story, but therein also lies the problem. The game can become monotonous, especially during later parts of the game. It becomes more like a grind to finish the game, but I still think it's worth it. In my opinion, the replayability might be among the worst in a game that I've ever played. Anyway, if you like ninjas / samurais and Japanese folklore and don't mind being challenged, get Nioh. I sure look forward to whatever Team Ninja develops next. Number 7. 747. It's truly been a great year for horror games, with releases such as Prey and The Evil Within 2, which I haven't had the opportunity to play, unfortunately. But Resident Evil was an exciting game that I really couldn't miss, as I loved the other games, especially the fourth one. So I gathered some friends to play it with, and for me, since I'm a little wuss when playing scary games alone. I was extremely skeptical about this iteration. After Resident Evil 5 and 6, it seemed like the franchise was destined to die in shame. Gladly, I was proven to be wrong. Oh, how wrong I was. It's clear that Resident Evil 7 have been inspired by the unfortunate PT, both style and gameplay wise. I'm kinda glad they let themselves be led down that path. In September this year, it had sold as much as 4.1 million copies, and deservedly so. The game is played in first person, and it starts out with an old video from the protagonist's girlfriend, Mia, who'd been missing for 3 years. He gets a mysterious email that says he should pick her up and at what address. The whole thing stinks. He decides to go there, and in just a few moments he's thrown into a mess of monsters, puzzles, a family and survival. The family in question is the Bakers, a weird, super strong family with extreme living conditions. As you get deeper into this fucked up mix, you start to realize all the sinister things happening behind the curtains. The ending is also satisfying, and if you paid attention throughout the game, it becomes even better. Even though the replayability is lacking, the 9 to 12 hours experience you get out of the game is not one to be missed. Aside from stellar visuals and superb voice acting, the game is a great cornerstone for future Resident Evil games. I almost forgot this, but this is also one of the few complete games you can play with a PlayStation VR. The scares become so much worse. Some negative things to note is the game length and the drop in polish during later stages of the game. Resident Evil 7 holds some very satisfying gameplay elements, and that coupled together with a great story and haunting horror is sure to leave you satisfied. Number 6. My oh my. In terms of style and graphics, Cuphead was probably the most well-made game of 2017. Whenever I played it, I could feel the love that the developers put into the game. To resemble the 1930s cartoons that the game is inspired by, every fucking animation is hand-drawn. You have to understand that a single attack animation could have taken hours to draw. But these maniacs didn't hate themselves enough, so they decided to release the game at the extremely expensive price of €20. What the fuck? Jokes aside, this is a great game that you should actually buy and play either by yourself or with another friend in true couch co-op. These are the kinds of developers you want to support, that makes the gaming industry thrive and become better. The game itself starts off with a charming storybook intro that immediately sets you on a path of getting the many soul contracts belonging to the devil himself from a variety of characters. Why? Well, unfortunately, both Cuphead and Mugman, the main protagonists, sold their soul to the devil, so now they owe him. Classic setup, and it feels exactly like in the old days, but this time with better graphics and gameplay. The game consists of two different types of stages. You have these amazing and unique boss fights with several stages and their own theme. And these bosses really challenges your skills, because 3 hits and you're dead. And you have to start all the way over from the beginning. Then you have the run and gun stages that feels a lot like Contra. All stages have their own themes and style to it. The variation from many boss fights littering Cuphead is honestly a welcome change. The best part is the obvious atmosphere oozing from every crevice, the art style and the music. Everything blends together to one of the best games this year, and I've got almost nothing but praise for it. The only reason as to why it isn't higher on my list is the basic story and the genre itself. Even so, I enjoyed every moment of playtime, and this is a game I could recommend to anyone, any day. I look forward to whatever studio MDHR puts out next. Number 5. Oh my sweet, merciful maker. This is a great game. I watched Donkey's video titled The Good Year, where he showed a glimpse of the game while talking up the game. And when Donkey recommends a game like that, I just had to test it. I had the perfect opportunity to test during the summer when I was sick for like a week or something. I needed the time since it took many hours to complete, and I haven't even done everything yet. Also, the game is €15. It feels like I'm stealing a great piece of art. If you like Metroidvania games with beautiful animations that's also drawn by hand, with an intriguing story, you'll love this one. If you decide to play with a controller, which I highly recommend, the controls becomes much more accurate and so does the platforming. That's not to say that the game is easy, quite the opposite. A huge map with hidden sections and few and far in between checkpoints doesn't make it easier. And speaking of the map, it's quite a large game. It has sections inaccessible early on, which encourages remembering where these so-called walls are, so you can go back later to explore even more. The map is varied in both theme and design, and the stunning backgrounds and amazing soundtrack helps bring every section to life with either happy tingly music or dark ominous music. Exploring these areas helps you scribble together a map that you can buy from an NPC in every area, and this makes the whole game feel like an adventure. The aforementioned story starts off simple and a bit unclear. Later on it starts evolving into a deep and touching storyline that also includes a plethora of interesting NPCs, which you meet all over the so-called world. If you want to understand everything about the story, you really need to pay attention and also read lore stones scattered throughout the world. It's really hard to mention something that's less good with this game, but if I had to complain about something, it would be the relatively hard entry to newcomers, and honestly, the lack of direction can become overwhelming. Despite these negative aspects, the game is worth every penny and more in my book, and I appreciated everything the game gave me during my playthrough. Hopefully, Team Cherry can continue supporting the game and continue giving us great worlds to explore. Number 4.
In this waking nightmare, where all dreams come true, you searched for control.
This was a good surprise. I was gonna skip out on this at first. I had seen some brief gameplay on YouTube and I heard and read about it just a little bit on social medias too. I always just assumed that it would be a $60 game, but when I saw the price, half of it, I knew I just had to try it out for myself. And I am so glad I did. The game is revolutionary in many fields. One is the notable psychological aspects that plagues Senua during her journey. The developers worked together with neuroscientists, mental health specialists, and they've also brought in a lot of different people who've been victims of similar psychosis and psychological experiences to get feedback on the representations of the same aspects in the game and to get the feeling of realism right. And while you play the game, you follow the protagonist Senua, who embarks on a journey through a Norse mythology-inspired world to reclaim the soul of her lover, Dillion, from the grasp of Hela in Helheim. All of Senua's emotions and reactions have been motion captured and voice acted by the, to say the least, talented Melina Jurgens, who hadn't done any acting before this. She's extremely believable and her emotions shine through, letting the player in on the happy and less happy stages of the game. The game's story is pretty deep, and you need to rack your brains at certain points to understand it all. I had to actually replay the game and read about it to understand everything. And that becomes so satisfying for someone like me who truly enjoys these kinds of stories. And the ending is also super good. The game was an experience, an independent AAA game with the goals of getting AAA quality with less of a budget, that also let them lower the price. It was a bet for the studio, but it paid off. And I haven't talked about the combat yet, as it doesn't take center stage, but at certain points, especially one in particular, it truly shines and delivers a silent, strong feeling, one which I shall not spoil. The game also has some cool visual illusions acting as puzzles for the player. I cannot give enough praise to this game, even though it's relatively short. The combat can become oppressive later on in the game, but the developers introduce an adaptive difficulty that recognizes the player's skill level and adjusts itself depending on it. I love this game so much, and the story of Senua touched my soul. More developers should take these kinds of risks and experiment more with games in general. As Hellblade has proved, it can certainly pay off.
Lies the seat of his soul. So must carry his vessel to bring him back home.
Number 3. This game is a true masterpiece, so to speak. Damn! This year has been good for gaming. I don't know what kind of magic dust Guerrilla Games sprinkled on this game, but it's clear that these guys love making games and love making people happy to play them. They are hard workers and they know their craft. First of all, the game is visually stunning and the world is detailed and rich in various ways. The environments are breathtaking both during the day and the night, offering the player beautiful areas that are a mix of high tech and nature. I have no idea how they managed it, but the game runs perfectly fine without frame drops on even the original PS4. The game's story has a really good setup. By having a throwback to the young Aloy, the protagonist of the game, we experience how the world seemingly is. The world is set in the 31st century and humans have regressed to primitive tribal societies because of an unknown calamity. Even so, the world is filled with highly technological machines and traces of former civilizations. This mix seemed to be a sure fail from the get-go, especially from my point of view, but it works, and it works well. Throw in some drama, character development, tragedy, and you've got yourself a great mix. Aloy as a person is quite interesting too. Being an outcast from an early age has made her hardened and skilled. The gameplay itself blends together exploration with some light parkour and hunter roleplaying, and the hunter part is obviously the most fun thing. Hunting different technological monsters with different weaknesses is super fun, and the ability to completely destroy a creature if you know its weakness also encourages experimentation. You can also invade these cool fortresses and kill human beings, and you yourself get to choose how to approach this, either stealthily or by rushing in, bows blazing. Aloy also has a skill tree where each player can choose how to build her and how they want to play the game. It's not that deep, but it still offers enough. The dialogue is often rather stiff, and together with an okay stealth system, it could have been better. Aside from that, you can also find a lot of collectibles, audio logs, flowers. It can get too much at times. I loved playing Horizon this year. It surprised me in the best of ways. I was entranced by the interesting setting, the fun gameplay and Aloy herself. Guerrilla themselves have said they have an interest in expanding the world of Horizon, perhaps with a Horizon Zero Dawn 2. We'll see what they can come up with, but I highly recommend this game. It's to me the third best game of the year. Number 2. I played the original Divinity Original Sin, and while I thought it was fun, it was kinda messy, unclear where the objectives were, but I'm fucking stupid, so it's probably why. I was sure Divinity Original Sin 2 would be more of the same, and it was, but they improved it tenfold. The formula has certainly been improved, and the game is loaded with such deep care and love, seeping from every damn place you visit. It's mind-blowing how much polish has been made. I can't even believe how much content you'll get for what you pay, and it makes me want to support the developers even more. In my opinion, this is a true RPG, in which you actually roleplay with your characters and their characterisms. It's got that old school charm, but with modern gameplay and mechanics, deep characters with individual storylines and mannerisms, a good story to keep you interested in the game, and the freedom to build your character in whatever way you feel like. You can be a standard knight with bone-crushing blows and a huge HP pool, or you can mix fire magic with necromancy and demolish your enemies, followed by making use of their blood and corpses in battle. That's fucking metal. It's extremely fun to mix with these masteries and skills to create the best combination possible, or to just have a blast while playing. One of my favorite combinations is geomancy together with pyromancy, where you can just blow everything up and spread chaos on the battlefield. The multiplayer even lets you play together with friends online, creating a unique character to follow on their journey too. The combat is deep and realistic, most of the time at least. And you can do a lot of different combinations. You can electrocute water, freeze people on ice, characters can slip while walking across ice, and there are many more ways to interact with each environment. Everything is turn-based, and each character gets a certain amount of action points per turn. And these are then used when doing actions such as walking, attacking, etc. etc. Archers and spellcasters also gets longer range and more damage when having the high ground.
I have the high ground!
This lets you plan a strategy you think will work in battle, or just go ham. Exactly like the rest of the game, there are so many details which enrich your experience. The most dangerous thing about this game is honestly how easily you can get stuck in it, playing for hours upon hours with no end in sight. The game also has amazing visuals, an absolutely fantastic soundtrack, and everything is voice acted. And I mean fucking everything. There are a lot of stuff here, and I urge you to check out the game for yourself. The developers love the community, and you can feel it when playing the game. The only con I can think up is the slightly confusing journal for newer players. But it's such a nitpick that I feel bad for even listing it as a con. This is the most complete and fun tactical RPG I've played in years, and it's raised the bar for future tactical RPGs. Larian Studios, I salute thee.
Unpredictable and always dramatic world of Divinity Original Sin 2!
Number 1.
You are truly as he anticipated. This is truly an unjust game. But if my voice is reaching you, I beg you, please overcome this game and save the world.
And for my number 1 best game of 2017, of course, in my opinion, is the amazing Persona 5. The game itself had been hyped up for a long time before release, and I was so happy when the game met and even exceeded those expectations. And let me just tell you, the first time I played through the game without even doing everything, it took me 100 hours. 100 hours. I mean, that's just insane value, and since I completed it, I've also gotten the Platinum trophy. The story is brilliant and deeper than I first thought. The music and aesthetics are top fucking notch, and the game has got style. But what really makes it great is that the characters themselves are interesting. Starting off rather slow, the game picks up the pace after a short while, and then it just never stops going on full speed through the rest of the game. The personas this time around are like masks, depicting one's inner self or one's personality. And the characters' personas are heavily inspired by various gentleman thieves and rebellious women. You can see that a lot of the game's design and themes are heavily inspired by the same theme: rebellion, thieves, and standing up against corruption. Otherwise, the game is mostly classic Persona through and through. As other games in the Persona series, the game takes place during a school year. And even though the story starts off simple with an abusive teacher, it escalates into something much more extensive. And even though the game follows students around the age of 15 or so, it handles very mature stuff, like themes of rape, abuse, suicide, and even murder. It was so interesting that I really started to care about the group of phantom thieves, and it felt like I myself was a part of their group in a way. Exactly like the other Personas, the gameplay mostly consists of exploring dungeons, living everyday life, and fighting against society's corruption. You fight against these evil people by entering their subconscious via palaces, and eventually stealing their treasure, which is basically the evil within their hearts, and by doing so making them see the error of their ways. However, this time around, the palaces is beautifully crafted with themes reflecting the person owning the palaces. Everything comes together into one of two possible endings, which both are really satisfying. I love this Persona oh so much, and despite what others may think, I regard it as one of the best RPGs I've had the pleasure of playing, and for that matter, one of the best RPGs that I think has ever been made. Video games have become an increasingly important media, and while a lot of people may say they are just games, to me there's something more. Persona 5 is gonna stay within my soul for the rest of my life, because it managed to steal my heart.
To hold the power to overturn even the most dire of predicaments.
Well, and that is the games I thought were the best in 2017. Now, I haven't had the opportunity to get a Switch yet, so that's probably why Zelda or Mario isn't on this list. Otherwise, this is just my opinion, of course, so if you have other opinions, you're free to post them down below. And if you liked the video, you can always subscribe, and if you didn't, you can leave a dislike. Anyway, I hope this year will be a great year for every one of you, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.